Hello, my name is Seth Manfield, and I am a professional Magic the Gathering player for Team Envy. Today we are going to be talking about the skill of managing your lands. The first one is building your deck. How many lands do you want to put in your deck and what types of lands? The second is going to be prioritizing hitting your early land drops. And the third is going to be how to optimize your lands in the later stages of a game. So now we are going to be going over what lands to put in your deck. As you can see, I have chosen a Simic ramp deck to show you all in the historic format, but I'm not going to be focusing as much on the individual spells in the deck as the mana base. So as we look at the lands here, you'll see a few different types of lands. So we've got our basics, 10 forests and 2 islands. Generally, most decks want some basics, and that's just the classic basics. They've been around as old as the game itself. You can always have access to as many basic lands as you want. This particular deck is base green, right? So we've got a little bit of blue in the deck, but we want to prioritize our green mana first because we've got more green cards than blue cards. So you will notice when looking at our colored sources of mana, prioritizing green over blue. We have 10 forests and only 2 islands. Now sometimes you will have cards in your deck that actually search out basic lands, which is another incentive to have at least some amount of basic lands in your deck. We do have a card like that in Cultivate. So we've got a few different ways to accelerate our lands, but we also want some non-basic lands in our deck. So we want some lands that produce both of our colors. We are a 2-color deck. Obviously, you can play 1 color, you can play up to 5 colors. This deck is a 2-color deck, so we want to be able to prioritize having both colors, which is why you'll see these non-basic lands like Breeding Pool, like Temple of Mystery, like Hinterland Harbor that produce both of our colors, which is really nice to have access to. We want to be able to play the maximum amount of all of those cards. And because we have a pretty consistent mana base in this particular deck, we also get to play some sweet non-basic lands that don't actually produce any colored mana, but they have an additional ability tacked onto them. So we look at Arch Veraska, a land that can draw us extra cards, and then Blast Zone, which is a land that can actually remove opposing threats from the battlefield if we want to. So this is the mana base that I've gone with for this deck. Our next tip is going to be prioritizing our early land drops. So we want to be making sure in this deck that we're able to hit our lands even past turn 4, turn 5. We really need a lot of lands to be able to win our game. So 3 lands is actually okay, but we don't have any way to accelerate out additional lands. We've got some top-end plays, which are not necessarily the cards we want to be prioritizing. We want to have cards like Explore, we want to have cards like Growth, Spiral, Cultivate to be able to hit those additional lands. I'm actually going to mulligan this hand and see what we find, and keep this 6. So unlike the first hand, we've actually have a Grazer, we have a Growth Spiral, so we've got ways to accelerate, and that's going to allow us to get our lands onto the battlefield faster, and that's going to be extremely important. So let's go ahead and put back this Grazer. We're gonna keep this. So Ugin, we're happy to have only 1 payoff card here, and we want to be prioritizing even finding a 4th land in this situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this Temple of Mystery into play, and we basically want to scry anything that's not mana. We want to scry that away. And it looks like our opponent's actually playing a similar deck to ours, which kind of shows why a deck like this is so good. So we've gotten a little bit unlucky. We are going to fire off this Growth Spiral, and there you go. Because we put this Tamiyo on the bottom of our deck, we now were able to find the land that we needed. If we draw a land next turn, we're able to play the Cavalier of Thorns, and that's really what the deck wants to be doing, is getting to that 5th land, which allows you, if we are able to cast this, it allows us to continue to accelerate our mana up to the Krasis and up to the Ugin. So as it turns out, we were able to find that 5th land right off the top, and now we're going to be talking about how to optimize our lands once we've gotten our early acceleration out of the way. So here we go. We're going to cast this Krasis, and we've got an option of which land we want to grab here. I'm going to go with the Temple of Mystery, which allows us to get another Scry, and because we're in the late game now, we can actually no longer prioritize the lands as much. We want to be looking at cards that allow us to close out the game, and so the Krasis and the Ugin are the type of cards that we want to really be looking at. So we actually drew a Castle Garenbrig, which is one of our non-basic lands that provides us an additional effect. What this land can do is it allows us to get 6 mana off of the activation, which then is going to be 8 mana total, which is perfect for our Krasis. So I do want to talk about one type of exception here. When looking at these 3 tips, we are playing a ramp deck in this situation, right? There are other decks that you can be playing. So our deck happens to top out at 8 mana, at 10 mana. We can use a lot of lands because of these expensive cards we do have. There's other decks that maybe top out at 4 mana plays, right? So they're managing their land drops may just be prioritizing hitting land 2 or land 3 because their mana curve is going to not be as high. They're not going to have as many expensive cards, so that's going to be a different style deck. Here we're actually playing 30 lands in our deck and a lot of acceleration because we have these super expensive cards. So depending on what archetype you are going to be playing, it's going to shift a little bit how many lands you want to be playing and what the late game top end of the curve is going to look like. And that is it. Thank you for tuning in to Predator Training Room. And this is Seth Manfield saying, good luck hitting your land drops.